10 Stoic Secrets People Learn Too Late. Stoic Philosophy. There are truths that eventually find every person, whether they seek them out or not. Some discover them early, through discipline and reflection. Most discover them late, often after years of unnecessary suffering that could have been avoided entirely. The Stoics spent their lives trying to compress these hard-earned lessons into philosophy, hoping to spare others the slow, painful path of learning everything through loss. In this video, we're covering 10 Stoic secrets that most people only understand once it's nearly too late to use them fully. If you'd rather learn these now, while there's still time to apply them, subscribe to Quotes Library, because this channel exists to give you the wisdom that usually only arrives after decades of hard living. These secrets are not complicated. They were never meant to be locked behind academic language or reserved for scholars. The Stoics wrote for soldiers, emperors, slaves, and merchants alike, because they believed wisdom should be usable by anyone willing to sit with it honestly. What follows are 10 of the most important truths from that tradition, the ones people so often say they wish they had understood decades earlier. Let's make sure you don't have to wait that long. Secret 1. Time is the only truly irreplaceable resource. The first secret people learn too late is that time, unlike money, opportunity, or possessions, can never be recovered once it's spent. Seneca wrote an entire work on the shortness of life, arguing that life is not actually short, but that people waste so much of it on things that do not matter that it only appears short in hindsight. Most people treat their hours as though they are endless, spending them carelessly on distraction, resentment, and delay, until suddenly there are far fewer hours left than they assumed. The tragedy is not death itself, but the realization, often arriving too late to change anything, of how much time was spent avoiding the very things that mattered most. Difficult conversations postponed indefinitely, passions never pursued because the timing never felt perfect, relationships neglected because there always seemed to be more time later. The Stoics urge you to treat time as the precious, finite resource it actually is, starting today rather than waiting for some imagined future moment of readiness that may never actually arrive. Audit your hours honestly, notice where they disappear. This single shift, made early enough, changes the entire trajectory of a life. Secret 2. Control is narrower than you think. The second secret is the realization that so much of the anxiety people carry comes from trying to control things that were never within their power to begin with. Epictetus built his entire philosophy around this distinction, teaching that peace comes only from focusing your energy on your own judgments, actions, and choices, while releasing your grip on outcomes, other people's opinions, and events beyond your influence. Most people spend enormous energy trying to control how others perceive them, trying to force outcomes that depend on circumstances outside their reach, trying to manage things that were simply never theirs to manage. This exhausts a person over time, often without them realizing exactly why they feel so depleted. Learning this distinction early, rather than after years of unnecessary suffering, frees up an extraordinary amount of mental and emotional energy. Ask yourself daily what is actually within your control, and direct your effort there exclusively. Everything else, released honestly, becomes far lighter to carry. If lessons like this are helping you see your life more clearly, subscribe to Quotes Library now, because we're only just getting started, and there's a lot more Stoic wisdom ahead this week. Secret 3. Other people's opinions rarely matter as much as they feel. The third secret is one many people only fully accept in the later years of their life, often with visible regret about the decades spent worrying otherwise. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself constantly about the foolishness of caring excessively about the opinions of others, particularly those whose judgment he did not even respect in areas that mattered. Yet so many people organize entire decades of choices around impressing people whose approval, in the end, meant almost nothing. The people whose opinions genuinely deserve your attention are usually a very small circle, those who know you deeply, who have earned your trust through consistency, and whose judgment reflects real wisdom rather than casual reaction. Everyone else's opinion, no matter how loudly expressed, is largely irrelevant to the actual quality of your life. Learning this early spares you from decades of decisions made out of fear rather than genuine desire. Ask yourself honestly whose opinion you're actually protecting when you avoid a bold choice, and you'll often find it belongs to someone whose regard was never worth the sacrifice in the first place. Secret 4. Comfort is not the same as a good life. The fourth secret involves the difference between comfort and genuine fulfillment, a distinction the Stoics understood clearly but modern life often blurs completely. Seneca warned against the softening effects of excessive ease, arguing that a life spent avoiding all discomfort produces a person unprepared for the inevitable hardships that life eventually brings anyway. Many people chase comfort as though it were the ultimate goal, only to discover, often too late, that comfort alone left them feeling empty rather than fulfilled. Growth, meaning, and genuine satisfaction almost always require some discomfort along the way. The discomfort of discipline, of honest self-reflection, of pursuing something difficult rather than something easy. The Stoics practiced voluntary hardship deliberately, choosing discomfort on purpose so they would never become dependent on constant ease. This is not about rejecting comfort entirely, but about recognizing that a life optimized purely for comfort is often a life optimized for regret. Seek challenges that stretch you, even when easier paths are available, because the version of yourself built through difficulty is almost always stronger than the version built through avoidance. Secret 5. Anger costs more than it ever delivers. The fifth secret is understanding just how expensive anger actually is, a lesson many people learn only after anger has already cost them relationships, opportunities, and years of peace. Seneca wrote an entire treatise on anger, calling it a temporary madness that damages the person feeling it far more than the person it's directed at. Anger feels powerful in the moment, but it consistently produces decisions that people regret once the heat of the emotion has passed. Learning to manage anger early, rather than after decades of damage caused by unchecked outbursts, protects relationships, reputation, and inner peace in ways that are difficult to fully appreciate until you've lived both versions of life. This does not mean suppressing anger or pretending it doesn't exist. It means creating space between the feeling and the reaction, so that your response is chosen deliberately rather than dictated by a temporary surge of emotion. The Stoics were not emotionless. They were simply unwilling to let fleeting feelings make permanent decisions on their behalf. A short story, The Old Soldier's Regret. There is a story, passed down in various forms through Stoic teaching circles, about an old Roman soldier named Gaius who spent his final years living quietly outside the city, tending a small garden and speaking rarely with visitors. A young man, eager for wisdom, sought him out one afternoon, having heard that Gaius had once served with great honor and had also, later in life, studied under a Stoic teacher. The young man asked Gaius what he regretted most from his long life. Gaius was quiet for a long moment before answering. He did not speak of battles lost or wounds carried. He spoke instead of the years he spent furious at men who had wronged him decades earlier, anger he carried long after those men had died or moved on entirely. Anger that cost him relationships with his own children, who grew tired of a father consumed by grievances that no longer served any purpose. He spoke of the years he spent chasing the approval of commanders whose respect, once earned, meant almost nothing to his actual happiness. He spoke of the countless nights he spent unable to sleep, worrying about things entirely outside his control, energy that could have gone toward his family, his garden, his own peace, instead spent on outcomes he never had any power over in the first place. The young man asked when Gaius had finally learned to let these things go. Gaius smiled sadly and said it had taken him nearly 60 years, and that his only true regret was not learning it sooner. He told the young man that the wisdom itself was not complicated. It had always been available to him. He had simply been too consumed by his own noise to listen until very late in his life. The young man left that conversation and, according to the story, applied everything he had heard immediately, sparing himself decades of the very suffering Gaius had described. This is precisely why these lessons are shared, not so each person has to discover them alone through painful trial, but so the wisdom can be passed forward, sparing the next generation from learning everything the hard way. If this story moved you even slightly, that is exactly the kind of reflection Quotes Library is built to create. Subscribe now, because there is far more of this wisdom waiting, and applying it earlier than most people do could change the entire shape of your life. Secret 6. Legacy is built in ordinary days, not dramatic ones. The sixth secret is that the moments people remember you for are rarely the dramatic, highlight-worthy events, but the quiet, ordinary consistency shown across thousands of unremarkable days. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections not about grand victories, but about how to handle irritation, fatigue, and the mundane frustrations of daily governance with integrity. He understood that character is revealed far more in ordinary moments than in rare, dramatic ones. Many people wait for some future significant moment to finally become the person they want to be, imagining that transformation happens all at once, through some singular decisive event. In reality, The person you become is built entirely from the accumulation of small, ordinary choices made consistently over time. Learning this early, rather than waiting for a dramatic turning point that may never arrive, allows you to start building the life and character you actually want today, in the unremarkable moments that make up the overwhelming majority of any life. Secret 7. Most worry is wasted energy. The seventh secret is one that nearly everyone eventually confirms through their own lived experience, usually with visible frustration at how much energy was wasted along the way. The Stoics taught that the vast majority of things people worry about never actually happen, and even the ones that do happen rarely unfold in the specific, catastrophic way the anxious mind predicted in advance. Worry, in this sense, is almost always a poor investment of energy, producing suffering in advance of events that may never even occur. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, a truth confirmed repeatedly by anyone who reflects honestly on their own worrying patterns. Learning to interrupt anxious spirals early, rather than accepting them as an unavoidable part of life, saves years of unnecessary suffering. This does not mean ignoring genuine risks or avoiding preparation. It means recognizing the difference between productive planning and unproductive spiraling, and choosing consistently to redirect your energy toward the former. Secret 8. Gratitude changes what you see, not just how you feel. The eighth secret involves the practical power of gratitude, often dismissed as a soft or sentimental idea until a person experiences its actual effect on perception. The Stoics practiced deliberate gratitude, reflecting daily on what they already had rather than constantly focusing on what remained absent. This was not about forced positivity, but about training the mind to see accurately, since a mind trained only to notice deficiency will always find something missing, no matter how much abundance actually surrounds it. People who cultivate this practice early often report a fundamentally different experience of the exact same circumstances that once felt insufficient to them. This is not magic, it is simply a shift in attention, deliberately practiced until it becomes automatic. Waiting until later in life to discover this means spending decades focused on lack, when the same energy, redirected earlier, could have produced a far richer experience of everything already present. If these reflections are shifting how you see your own life, subscribe to Quotes Library, because this is exactly the kind of transformation this channel is designed to support, week after week. Secret 9. Real strength is quiet. The ninth secret is understanding that genuine strength rarely announces itself loudly. The Stoics respected calm endurance far more than dramatic displays of toughness, because they understood that anyone can perform strength temporarily, but very few can sustain it quietly, consistently, without needing an audience to witness the effort. Many people spend years trying to prove their strength through visible, performative means, only to realize later that the strongest people they ever knew were often the quietest. This secret matters because chasing the appearance of strength often distracts from actually building it. Real resilience is developed through private discipline, honest reflection, and the willingness to endure difficulty without needing recognition for it. Learning to value this quiet strength early, rather than chasing louder, more visible validation, produces a far more durable version of confidence, one that does not collapse the moment the audience disappears. Secret 10. Death gives life its urgency. The 10th and final secret is perhaps the most difficult, yet the Stoics considered it the most important. Marcus Aurelius reflected on mortality constantly, not out of morbidity, but because he understood that a clear awareness of life's finite nature is what gives everyday choices their real weight and urgency. Most people avoid thinking about death entirely, and in doing so, unconsciously live as though they have unlimited time, which quietly drains the urgency from decisions that actually deserve it. Confronting mortality honestly, rather than pushing it away, tends to clarify priorities with startling speed. Grudges shrink. Fear of judgment fades. The importance of pursuing meaningful work and honest relationships becomes obvious, once you stop pretending you have infinite time to get around to them eventually. Learning this early, rather than only in the final years of life, changes how every single day afterward gets spent. This is not a call to fear death, but an invitation to let its certainty sharpen how seriously you take the time you actually have. We've covered 10 truths today that so many people only discover once most of their life has already passed, often with visible regret about the years spent without this clarity. The good news is that none of these secrets require decades of suffering to understand. They only require the willingness to sit with them honestly, starting now, rather than waiting for hardship to teach the same lessons the difficult way. If this video gave you something worth carrying forward, subscribe to Quotes Library now, because there is a great deal more Stoic wisdom ahead, and every person who joins this channel helps it reach someone else who needs exactly this kind of clarity today. Share this with someone who could use the reminder that it's not too late to apply any of this, no matter where they currently find themselves. You do not have to learn these lessons the hard way. You only have to choose, starting today, to live as though you already understand them. Keep becoming.